When people hear machine learning in security monitoring, the idea can sound like a magic upgrade that automatically finds attackers hiding in the noise. It is true that machine learning can help, especially in environments with large volumes of events and patterns that are hard to spot by hand. But it is not magic, and it is not a substitute for clear monitoring fundamentals. Evaluating machine learning thoughtfully means understanding what kinds of problems it can solve well, where it struggles, and what data it needs to produce reliable results. Beginners often assume that if a system uses machine learning, it must be smarter than traditional detections. But a machine learning model is only as good as the data it sees and the assumptions built into it. Machine learning can amplify both strengths and weaknesses because it can process enormous amounts of information quickly, but it can also produce confident-looking outputs that are wrong. This episode is about building a clear mental model of benefits, limits, and data requirements so you can judge machine learning claims with healthy skepticism. The goal is not to reject machine learning or to worship it, but to treat it like any other security capability that must earn trust through evidence. A good way to start is by defining machine learning, ML, in plain terms. Machine learning is a set of methods where a system learns patterns from data and uses those patterns to make predictions or classifications, instead of relying only on fixed rules written by humans. In monitoring, that might mean learning what normal behavior looks like for a user, a device, or a service, and then flagging behavior that deviates from that learned baseline. It might also mean grouping events into clusters that look similar, which can help highlight unusual outliers. Another possibility is using machine learning to classify events as more or less risky based on features extracted from logs, such as the rarity of an action or the combination of actions that occurred in a short time window. For beginners, it helps to remember that machine learning does not understand intent the way humans do. It finds patterns that correlate with outcomes it was trained on or patterns that look unusual compared to past data. That can be powerful, but it also means the system can be fooled if the patterns change or if the training data was incomplete. Understanding that pattern focus is the first step in evaluating claims realistically. The benefits of machine learning and monitoring usually fall into a few categories, and the first is scale. Modern environments generate more events than humans can review, and machine learning can prioritize and summarize that volume. Instead of presenting every event equally, a model can highlight the few that are most unusual or most likely to represent risk. Another benefit is pattern discovery, because some suspicious behaviors are subtle and spread across time or across systems, making them hard to capture in simple rules. Machine learning can sometimes surface these patterns by noticing correlations and deviations that humans would not easily see. A third benefit is adaptability, because rule-based detections can be brittle when environments change, while some machine learning approaches can adjust as behavior evolves. A fourth benefit is enrichment, because machine learning can help group similar alerts, reduce duplicates, or assign a risk score that helps analysts triage faster. For beginners, it is helpful to see these benefits as assistance rather than replacement. Machine learning can help humans focus attention, but humans still decide what matters and what actions to take. Another benefit that is often practical is anomaly detection, which is a common way machine learning is applied in monitoring. Anomaly detection focuses on finding deviations from normal patterns, such as a user logging in at an unusual time, a service accessing data it rarely touches, or a device making an unusual type of network connection. This can be useful because many attacks involve behavior that is unusual for the environment, even if it is not obviously malicious in isolation. Anomaly detection can also help identify misconfigurations or operational issues, because unusual behavior is not always an attack. For beginners, this is a key lesson. Machine learning alerts do not automatically mean compromise. They often mean something is unusual, and the job of the analyst is to determine whether unusual is risky or simply different. When machine learning is used well, it becomes a spotlight that points to the most interesting corners of the room. The spotlight does not decide what is dangerous, it highlights where you should look. The limits of machine learning start with the problem of ambiguity, because many security events are not clearly labeled as good or bad. In other words, the data often does not come with a ground truth answer. If you are training a model to recognize malicious behavior, you need examples of malicious behavior, but many environments have limited confirmed incident data, and what counts as malicious can vary. This can lead to models that are trained on incomplete or biased examples, which reduces reliability. Another limit is that attackers adapt, and machine learning models can be tricked by behavior that is designed to look normal or to mimic legitimate administrative activity. A model that relies heavily on past patterns can also struggle when the environment changes suddenly, such as during a migration, a new remote work policy, or a major software rollout. Beginners sometimes believe machine learning automatically handles change, but change can actually break assumptions and cause floods of false positives. The model may flag the new normal as abnormal until it learns, which can overwhelm analysts and damage trust. A second major limit is explainability, because many machine learning outputs are difficult to interpret. If a rule-based detection fires, you can often see exactly which condition was met, such as a certain process launching from an unusual location. If a machine learning model produces a risk score, it may not be obvious why the score is high, and that lack of clarity makes it hard for analysts to validate and respond. In security, validation matters because actions can be disruptive and teams need to justify decisions. Some machine learning approaches are more explainable than others, but the broader point is that a model that cannot be explained can create operational friction. Analysts may either ignore it because they do not trust it or accept it blindly because it seems authoritative, and both outcomes are dangerous. For beginners, it helps to adopt a simple rule. If an alert cannot be explained, it cannot be improved, and it cannot be defended. That does not mean you reject machine learning, but it means you demand enough transparency to support investigation. Explainability is not a luxury in security operations, it is part of safety. A third limit is that machine learning can be expensive, not just in licensing or compute, but in operational effort. Models often require tuning, monitoring, and maintenance to stay useful because data sources change, log formats shift, and behaviors evolve. If a model depends on a certain field that stops being collected, the model may degrade silently. If a model is trained on a certain time period and the organization changes significantly, the model's baseline may no longer represent normal behavior. Machine learning also tends to produce probabilistic outputs, meaning it deals in likelihoods, not certainty, and that requires teams to develop skill in interpreting those likelihoods. Beginners might expect a clean yes or no answer, but machine learning often produces a ranking of suspiciousness. That ranking can still be valuable, but it changes how triage must be done. A team that is not prepared for that can either overreact or underreact, both of which harm security outcomes. So the limit is not only technical, it is also organizational readiness to use the output responsibly. Data requirements are the third part of this episode title, and they are often the deciding factor in whether machine learning will help or hurt. Machine learning needs data that is sufficiently complete, consistent, and representative to learn meaningful patterns. If the data is missing from key systems, the model's view of reality will be incomplete, and it may draw wrong conclusions. If timestamps are inconsistent or identities are not stable, the model may misinterpret sequences of events. If the data includes too much noise or duplicated events, the model may learn patterns that reflect logging quirks rather than real behavior. Data quality matters because machine learning learns from what you give it, and it cannot know that your inputs are flawed unless you detect and correct those flaws. Another data requirement is volume, because many machine learning approaches need enough examples to learn baselines and variations. In a small environment with limited event diversity, a model might struggle to distinguish meaningful anomalies from normal variability. For beginners, this reinforces a crucial point. Machine learning depends on strong logging and strong data hygiene. If you have not built those foundations, machine learning may simply turn messy data into confusing predictions. Machine learning also requires context data that security teams sometimes overlook, such as asset criticality, user roles, and normal workflow patterns. An action that is risky for one user might be normal for another, and a model that lacks that context may generate noisy alerts. For example, a system administrator might regularly access many systems, while a finance user might not. So the same access pattern has different meaning depending on who is involved. This is why identity and asset enrichment often improve machine learning monitoring, because it gives the model more meaningful features to learn from. Another data requirement is stability over time, because many models assume that the environment's normal behavior does not shift too abruptly. When organizations change rapidly, models may need retraining or adjusted baselines, which becomes a maintenance responsibility. For beginners, it helps to see machine learning as something that is sensitive to the environment's rhythm. In a stable environment, it can learn stable patterns and highlight real anomalies. In a constantly changing environment, it may chase the moving target and generate confusion unless carefully managed. Evaluating machine learning and monitoring, therefore, involves asking practical questions that connect benefits, limits, and data requirements. You want to know what specific problem the model is trying to solve, because machine learning applied to a vague goal like find threats is less credible than machine learning applied to a specific use case. You want to know what data the model uses and whether your environment actually produces that data reliably. You want to know how the model's outputs will be explained to humans, because operational use depends on interpretability. You want to know how the model will be validated, meaning how you will measure whether it improves detection or reduces response time without creating unacceptable noise. You also want to know how the model will be maintained, including who owns it and what happens when the environment changes. For beginners, the key is to evaluate machine learning like any other control. Define success, test it, measure it, and adjust it. If a model cannot be validated, it should not be trusted for high-impact actions. If it can be validated and it demonstrably improves outcomes, it becomes a valuable part of monitoring. One of the healthiest ways to integrate machine learning is to pair it with more traditional detection methods instead of replacing them. Rule-based detections are often clear and reliable for known patterns, such as certain combinations of events that strongly indicate a threat. Machine learning can add value by finding unusual patterns that rules did not anticipate, or by prioritizing which alerts deserve attention first. When used together, rules provide explainable anchors, and machine learning provides additional discovery and prioritization. This combination also helps with trust, because analysts can validate machine learning outputs against known signals. Over time, machine learning findings can inspire new rules, and rule outcomes can provide labeled examples that improve models. For beginners, this reinforces the idea that security monitoring is layered. You do not choose between rules and machine learning as if one is modern and the other is obsolete. You choose a balanced approach where each method covers the other's weaknesses. When you step back, evaluating machine learning and monitoring is about realism. The benefits are real, especially for scale, prioritization, and anomaly discovery, but they are not automatic, and they depend on strong foundations. The limits are also real, including ambiguity, explainability challenges, adaptation by attackers, and operational complexity. Data requirements often decide success or failure because models need consistent, enriched, high-quality data to learn patterns that reflect real behavior. For a brand new learner, the biggest takeaway is that machine learning is a tool, not a guarantee. It can be a powerful assistant when used in the right scope, with clear validation, and with disciplined maintenance. When used without those conditions, it can create noise, false confidence, and wasted effort. The thoughtful path is to demand evidence that it improves outcomes in your environment, to understand the assumptions it makes, and to keep humans in the loop for interpretation and decision-making. That is how machine learning becomes a practical enhancement to monitoring rather than a distracting promise.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit DailyCyber.News.